What is the best method of communication? I'm Andrew, I'm the Flannel Philosopher, and I would like to talk a little bit about the method of communication. What's the best method to communicate? We have so many options now. Obviously there's in person, there's over the phone, there's text message, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's Snapchat, and the list will continue to go on perpetually. Everyone has their preferences on what they prefer for communication. We actually did a survey at our church a couple years back, and we found out in our church family there was 7 different primary methods of communication. I'm not here to tell you that TikTok is right, but Instagram is wrong, or that paper mail is the best and emails are wrong. But I think one thing we should think about is there are certain conversations where it doesn't really matter how we communicate. Now, that might be shooting a quick friend, an update. There's text messages can be efficient because they're just quick messages shot out, and those are really good. They don't disrupt. But if we're having hard conversations, I think it's important to try to get face-to-face as much as possible. And I say hard, sometimes it's a confrontation, sometimes it's trying to understand somebody, sometimes there's a disagreement. And when you get face-to-face, you can see much more than just the words. Have you ever seen a text message and you read it, and then later on you went back and you read it again and it meant something totally different? Well, that's so easy to do with something that's just written, particularly in short form. And so in complicated situations, I think it's very important, or complicated topics even, very important to get face-to-face if you can. Now, I know that's not always possible. So if you can't get face-to-face, well, I would at least recommend getting on a phone call. Now, I know that feels incredibly outdated to some people, but although it might feel outdated, it might feel inefficient, what's gained is that there's live feedback. You don't have a conversation that goes on over periods of time. You're focused on the conversation. How many of us done this? We pick up our phone, we fire off a message, and we completely forget about it until much, much later. Well, the conversation is paused or stopped, and the other person may be frustrated. Where if you get on a phone call, or perhaps even in person, there's something to be said for that. One thing I think on difficult conversations that we tend to do is we tend to fire off a message. We send something, we get it off our chest, and we really maybe didn't mean everything we said. Or even if we did, we should have waited until our mind and our heart kind of adjusted down to an appropriate level. And so much damage is done. The other advantage of in person or even over the phone is that it's not recorded. And I don't mean that in a legal sense. I mean that in a sense of if it's written down, we've all seen that harsh message that we go back and we can read it again and again and again. And if it's, certainly if it's in person or over the phone, there's things that we maybe don't remember, but if we don't say it perfectly, it's not as easily or as clearly remembered. And I think there's a huge value to that because we're not putting harsh or negative things in writing for people to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. Now, we shouldn't say harsh or negative things if we can help it live either, but if we don't get it perfectly, it's not going to be as critical. So just something to consider before you fire off a message. Think, what's the best method of communicating this? Not the words we'll talk about later, but what's the best method? Is this something that can easily be handled by any number of an app or text messages or emails? Or is this something that I really need to actually have a phone conversation or maybe a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting so that I can catch the tone, I can listen better, I can understand, and it's a more interactive format. So before you start that next big conversation, just think about it. What's the right method for having this conversation?